Moment when these new immigrants step onto the tarmac here at Ben Gurion Airport as the time when the words of the Bible written thousands of years ago come to life.
Imagine standing at an airport in Israel, watching as families reunite and step onto their homeland after centuries of exile. This isn't just a political story. This is the story of the Jewish people's return, a prophecy that has been waiting to come true for thousands of years. Could Ezekiel's vision be coming to life before our eyes? Thousands of years ago, the prophet Ezekiel delivered one of the most compelling and dramatic prophecies about Israel's future, a prophecy that seemed impossible at the time. In the midst of Israel's destruction, exile, and suffering, Ezekiel spoke of a day when the Jewish people would return to their homeland. But how could this be? The Israelites were scattered across the globe, their temple in ruins, and their identity nearly lost. Yet Ezekiel prophesied that God would gather them from the four corners of the earth, and they would return to the land of their ancestors. But what did Ezekiel see in his vision? He described the dry bones of Israel, representing the scattered people, coming back to life, a vivid picture of resurrection. A land once desolate would bloom again, and the people would return stronger than ever. This wasn't just a hopeful wish, it was a divine declaration that would echo through history. But the question remained, when would it happen?
Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awe-inspiring stories of faith, survival, and miracles.
What we are witnessing today is nothing short of a miracle. Israel's return wasn't a random occurrence. It's the fulfillment of this ancient prophecy. Stay with me, because what's happening now is part of a much bigger picture than you can imagine. Imagine being forced to leave your home, your family, your culture, and your faith behind. That's exactly what happened to the ancient Israelites when they were exiled by the Assyrians and Babylonians. The land that was promised to them was no longer theirs to live in. But even in the midst of suffering and loss, the promise of return never faded. The biblical covenant God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was clear. Their descendants would inherit the land of Canaan. But after years of war, exile, and persecution, it seemed impossible. The Israelites were scattered across the earth, living in hostile lands. How could this once thriving nation return to its land? This is where Ezekiel's prophecy becomes even more relevant. Ezekiel didn't just speak of the return of a few scattered people. He spoke of a massive restoration, an entire nation coming home, and the land itself coming back to life. In Ezekiel 36:24, God promised, "I will take you from the nations and gather you from all the countries and bring you back into your own land." But how would this come to pass? What Ezekiel foresaw wasn't just a physical return, but a spiritual revival. And the steps leading to this prophetic return? They started with events that seemed impossible at the time. Fast forward to the 20th century. After nearly 2,000 years of exile, many thought the prophecy of Israel's return was a thing of the past. But against all odds, the modern state of Israel was reborn in 1948.
The creation of Israel was not just a political act, it was a prophetic fulfillment. The Jewish people, who had long been scattered across the globe, began to return home. In one moment, the world witnessed a nation born out of the ashes of the Holocaust. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a divine intervention. The words of Isaiah 66:8 echoed through history. Can a nation be born in a day? Israel's birth, though controversial, marked a tangible step toward the fulfillment of Ezekiel's prophecy. But even as Israel came into existence, there were those who didn't believe it was truly part of the divine plan. What happened next would prove them wrong in ways they could never have imagined. In the decades following Israel's founding, the world witnessed an extraordinary phenomenon. Millions of Jews from all over the world began to return to Israel. It wasn't just a political migration, it was prophecy unfolding in real time. From the far reaches of Ethiopia, India, Russia, and even the United States, Jews were coming home in droves. But the most astonishing part? Many of them came from places where they had been living for generations, yet they felt a deep, spiritual connection to this land. One of the most remarkable stories comes from the Ethiopian Jews who were airlifted to Israel during Operation Solomon in 1991. These Jews who had lived in isolation for centuries were brought home in what can only be described as a divine miracle. They had preserved their faith and traditions, waiting for the day when they could return to their land. Their arrival in Israel was nothing short of a fulfillment of prophecy. But the story of Israel's return didn't stop there. The mystery of the lost tribes of Israel would soon be uncovered in ways that no one could have anticipated. For over 2,700 years, the 10 lost tribes of Israel were scattered across the world, their identities hidden. Among them was the tribe of Manasseh, exiled by the Assyrians in 722 BCE. It seemed as though they had vanished from history, lost to time. But in the 1990s, something extraordinary happened. Thousands of descendants of Manasseh living in India began to make their way back to Israel. The Ben Manasseh community had kept their traditions, faith, and connection to the ancient Israelites alive through the generations. When they arrived in Israel, it was as if a prophetic circle had been closed, a divine reunion of an ancient people returning to their promised land. Ezekiel's vision of the dry bones coming back to life was coming to pass in a way that no one had imagined. As more Jews returned to Israel, something else was happening. The land itself began to change, and not just in the physical sense. What would happen next would prove that the prophecy wasn't just about the people, it was about the land itself. Ezekiel prophesied that the land of Israel, which had once been desolate and barren, would begin to bloom and thrive when the Jewish people returned. In Ezekiel 36:34-35, God says, "The desolate land will be cultivated instead of lying desolate in the sight of all who pass through it." And that's exactly what happened. When the Jews returned to Israel, they didn't just reclaim land, they transformed it. The deserts bloomed, once dry fields became lush and fertile, and Israel became a global leader in agricultural innovation. Israel's technology sector skyrocketed, and the country became a major hub for high-tech industries. The once barren land was now alive with purpose, fulfilling the ancient promises made to Ezekiel and the prophets before him. The return wasn't just physical, it was spiritual and economic, a sign of divine restoration.
But just when it seemed like the return was complete, something began to stir. A growing tension began to rise, not just in Israel, but across the world. What could this mean for the future? The return to Israel, while miraculous, didn't come without challenges. As more Jews returned, a rise in anti-Semitism began to surface worldwide. It's not just a modern-day issue. It's a fulfillment of prophetic warnings. Ezekiel, along with other prophets like Zechariah and Isaiah, spoke of the opposition Israel would face in the last days. And in our time, that opposition has become increasingly visible. Countries and movements around the world have targeted Israel, attempting to undermine its sovereignty. But the return of Israel, despite the challenges, signals something much bigger. God is not finished with his plan for Israel, and those who oppose it are walking against the tide of prophecy. The tension that exists in Israel today is just one more sign that the world is moving closer to the ultimate fulfillment of these prophecies. The question now is, how much longer will it take for Israel to see full spiritual restoration?
And what role will the return of the Jewish people play in end-time events? The answer may be closer than we think. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel reclaimed Jerusalem, a city central to biblical prophecy. Jesus Christ himself foretold that Jerusalem would be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles were fulfilled. Luke 21:24. In 1967, this prophecy began to find its fulfillment when Israel took control of the city. This event wasn't just about political control, it was about spiritual significance. Jerusalem is where God promised to make his final dwelling place. The restoration of Jerusalem is one of the most significant signs of the end times, confirming that the Jewish people are not just returning to a land, they are moving toward fulfilling God's ultimate plan for the world. The fulfillment of these prophecies is a sign that something even greater is approaching. But what exactly will that be? The next chapter in this story is unfolding right before our eyes. In the book of Revelation, John speaks of the 144,000 sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel. Revelation 7:4-8. Some believe this is a symbolic number, but for many, it represents the literal descendants of Israel, destined to play a pivotal role in the last days. They will spread the gospel during a time of great tribulation, preaching God's word as a final call to the nations. As more Jews return to Israel, the prophecy of the 144,000 is more relevant than ever. The return of the Jewish people isn't just about regaining land. It's about fulfilling a divine mission that will impact the whole world. The question remains, are we witnessing the beginning of the end? And if so, how should we prepare for what is to come? As Israel's people continue to return home, the prophetic clock ticks down. Every immigrant, every story of return is a fulfillment of God's promise. But it's also a reminder that the final days are drawing near. The prophecies of Ezekiel, Isaiah, and others are coming to life before our very eyes. But what does this mean for us? As believers, we are called to watch, wait, and prepare for the coming of Christ. The signs are clear, and the return of Israel is the most visible indicator that God's plan is being fulfilled. The question is, are you ready? The final chapter of prophecy is still being written, but it's happening now, and it's happening fast. Watch closely, because the story is not over yet. The return of Israel is only the beginning. What happens next will change everything.